Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this CUS Urban Book Dialogue. We are delighted to have with us today Karina Pallagst, Marco Bontje, and René Fleschurz to present and discuss their new book, The Handbook on Shrinking Cities, which was published in 2022 by Edward Elgar. The book is co-edited by Karina Pallagst, Marco Bontje, Emmanuèle Cunningham-Sabot, and René Fleschurz. We are delighted to have three of the four co-editors today with us. Karina Pallagst is Professor for International Planning Systems at the Faculty of Spatial and Environmental Planning at the Technische Universität Kaiserslautern. Marco Bontje is here with us, Assistant Professor in Urban Geography at the Department of Geography, Planning and International Development Studies at the University of Amsterdam. Emmanuèle Cunningham-Sabot is Professor of Urban Studies at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. And René Fleschurz is Project Manager of the ReCity ITN project at the Department of International Planning Systems at the Faculty of Spatial and Environmental Planning at the Technische Universität Kaiserslautern. Just a little bit about the book. The Handbook for Shrinking Cities analyzes the multidimensional phenomena involved in urban shrinkage, explores the causal factors, addresses the way in which planning strategies and policies are steered, and looks for innovative solutions for revitalizing shrinking cities, discusses also, very importantly, what it would take to make a paradigmatic shift from growth-centered planning to planning for shrinking sustainability. So thank you so much, Marco, Karina, René, for being here with us. I'll pass the floor to the authors, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's a pleasure being here with you this afternoon and having the opportunity of presenting our book on shrinking cities. And as you can see, it's a co-authored work, and we have editors also from different institutions. Okay. Now here you can see the book, and let me tell you, it was quite a process developing that book. And because it is part of an international project, and the picture you can see here was actually taken at one of our field trips to Le Havre together with our PhD students. And it was a beautiful day, and we experienced really how the revitalization is going on in the city of Le Havre. But as I mentioned before, this was part of an endeavor that was really compelling, the ReCity ITN. And ITN is an initial training network. It is a program under the Marie Curie funding line of the Horizon 2020 program. It was quite a large project with over 3 million euros, and we carried out the project for 4 years. We were an impressive number of 16 project partners from university, but also other realms, and one of the aim was to involve and train 13 PhD students at 8 institutions. But some of you may not be so familiar with the problem of shrinking cities. And so let me take the opportunity of give you a little bit of a glimpse into this research phenomenon. Now, shrinking cities is really a global problem, and it has to do with cities losing population, with cities losing their industrial bases, being in decline. And this really happens all over the globe. To the left, you have a picture of the city of Flint, Michigan. In the center, you have a picture of the city of Nagasaki in Japan. And to your right, you can actually see the city of Kaiserslautern and some revitalization efforts here because it's a former textile mill that now turned into a cultural center. So these cities are all struggling with new paths and new opportunities of bringing life back, bringing quality of life back, bringing citizens back, businesses back, and becoming more vibrant and also resilient. So this was our major idea behind this book. Here you can see the consortium, the representatives of the institutions at the kickoff of our project. And you have Emmanuèle, Cunningham-Sabot in this picture, me in the center, René to the very right, and Marco somewhere in the middle here. And we were all very much deeply involved and very excited to be part of this project. Here you can see where the partners are located. Despite it was a European project, we were also able to involve institutions from Mexico, the University of Guadalajara, with Kent State University in the United States, and with the Nomura Research Institution in Japan. And not only universities such as University of Amsterdam or Kaiserslautern University, which is now RPTU University, Kaiserslautern Landau, and the ENS in Paris, where Emmanuèle is based, but also institutions from the private sector and also foundations like the Bertelsmann Foundation. Our objectives, and this is also what drives really the research and what drives the book, is we were comparing research across disciplines. We are involving not only spatial planning and geography, but also architecture, economics, social sciences. And we were looking into case studies to really frame the concept of shrinking cities, to look at what kind of new methodologies are out there and to find key strategic approaches towards revitalization. And the second and likewise important goal was to create a new generation of planners by means of very defined training, to see the synergies and to use the synergies between the disciplines and really to have experts that are able to deal with the challenges of shrinking cities. This involved training also in the form of mobility. And here you can see a chart that was crafted by actually one of the scholars, and she came from China and was recruited to Dortmund, where she mapped the mobility of the scholars. And of course, you can imagine, we started the project in 2018. Much of that mobility could not happen due to COVID. So we had plenty of time to focus on writing the book. The book is organized, and also the project was organized in 4 thematic pillars. Those were conceptualizing, governing, greening, and regrowing the shrinking city. Now, conceptualizing means first we had to think, what does it mean, shrinking cities and their revitalization? And one scholar in particular was working on the idea of shrinking smart. This was a very heavy task, I must say. Governing. This is about the people, the actors, driving the development of shrinking cities. And there's also a range, and one scholar was looking into new forms of governance. Regrowing, now this is a classic topic for shrinking cities because they are looking for alternatives to the industries that were in decline. Greening, as you can imagine, when businesses leave, when people leave, there's plenty of vacant space. So you can start green infrastructure. And also here, we had various PhD students dealing with that topic. And actually, we took these pillars and framed our book or structured our book along these lines. And here you can see the outline of the book. I already mentioned the book was written under COVID. And so I took the opportunity together with my team member, Patricia Hammer, to reflect in the introduction on shrinking cities in pandemic times. Where do we stand? Because this was really a big challenge, and we could figure out that many cities were really hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. In part 1, conceptualizing shrinking smart, you can see, first of all, an article that deals with the language of shrinking cities, because shrinking cities are not framed the same way in various cultures and in various countries. In the US, you have people referring to the legacy cities, which is much more a positive connotation towards this problem of shrinking cities. And there you have various aspects. You have shrinking cities versus declining cities. You have shrinking cities versus post-growth cities. And this is actually dealt with in this article. Then René Fleschurz was also here in this meeting, and myself, we were reflecting upon planning cultures. One of the PhD scholars was dealing with path dependencies and learning from the past. One scholar, as I already mentioned, was dealing with the concept of shrinking smart. Also, one scholar was talking about place attachment and the mindset in shrinking cities. One scholar was talking about social capital in shrinking cities. One working on a more theoretical paper on shrinking cities as epistemic communities. And one PhD scholar also looking
Okay, sorry about that. It was Karina's connection. I wasn't sure. I hope she will join us again in a moment. We'll just wait, I guess. If any of the René or Marco want to jump in, please do. Otherwise, we'll wait.
Not sure how fast Karina will join us again. So maybe I can try to take over.
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
You're back. She's back. Okay.
Okay.
You're muted, Karina. You need to unmute yourself.
So I'm back. Sorry, I don't know. All of a sudden, I was out of the meeting. But of course, I will go ahead and share my screen one more time.
Yeah.
So did you see part 1?
Yes.
Okay. So I will move to part 2. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, also in presentation.
Now, Karina,
Jetzt
now
wieder
we
mit
see
deinen
it.
Kommentaren, Karina.
How about now?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so in case I will get...
Jetzt wieder nicht wieder umgesprungen.
Ist wieder weg?
No,
Es
it's
springt
fine now.
gerade hin
It's
und
fine
her.
now.
Ich weiß nicht genau, was du tust, aber es springt gerade hin und her.
I'm not doing anything, so...
Now it's fine. I can see full screen, no? Yeah, we can all see full screen.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so just in case I get kicked out again for some reason, René, then it's up to you to share the screen in the meantime. Okay, thank you. Now, part 2, governing shrinking cities. One of the PhD students was writing about the role of active citizenship in emergent governance, and another 2 scholars were looking at governing the post-socialist shrinking city. Also, 2 scholars were looking at brownfield site reuse and governance, place-sensitive policy responses, planning systems for shrinking cities in Japan, also European small and medium-sized towns, and shrinking cities in a cross-border context. So you can see there's a whole range of aspects to this book. And part 3, greening and right-sizing, was dealing with adaptive infrastructure, of course. Then a literature review on shrinkage and urban green space. One scholar was writing about solar energy and technology production in shrinking cities. Urban green innovation was a topic. Public value capture of shrinking cities, carbon mitigation, regrowth challenges, and the flood risk problem, also certainly something relevant for the context of the Netherlands. And also cultural branding was a topic. And part 4 was dealing with variations of urban regrowth from a European perspective. Here Marco Bontje was involved. Then there were issues involving French heritage town centers. An American scholar wrote about the pop-up city and interim uses. One scholar about smart cities. Also, interestingly, the topic of refugees in shrinking cities was dealt with, and old industrial cities and knowledge workers. And last but not least, data policy and segregation in terms of culture-led economic development. So a whole range of knowledge gathered in this book. And here you can see, once again, the ReCity ESRs, who were, I always call them the heart and soul of this project, because they were trained in this project. They've formed a wonderful network themselves. And a little bit of half of them are now finished with their dissertation and the others close to finishing. So they are constantly really contributing to this knowledge exchange. Now we come to presenting several select chapters because we believe they represent the shrinking cities discourse very well. And now I would like to hand over to, I believe, Marco in this case.
Yeah. Like Karina already said, when we were preparing this presentation, we thought it would be nice to especially highlight the contributions of some of our early stage researchers, as they are called in the EU jargon of this international training network. So those that either have already meanwhile completed their PhD or are still working on it, but will finish soon. So we have, for each of the 4 parts, we have one contribution highlighted, because it's impossible to discuss all 30 chapters, of course, in more detail. And in each of the 4, an ESR is either the sole author or one of the co-authors. The first one is written by Victoria Pinoncelli. She is still working on her PhD. Will probably finish by the end of this year or maybe early next year. And she's working on a PhD in Paris at the Institute of our other co-editor that unfortunately couldn't join today, Emmanuèle Cunningham-Sabot. She is her supervisor. And she worked on the concept of path dependence and explored not only in this chapter, but eventually also in her PhD. To what extent it could be a relevant concept also in the debate about shrinking cities. So our chapter is called Path Dependence in Shrinking Cities, Learning from the Past. And she wants to, in this chapter, discuss path dependence, as she calls it, as a lens to enhance the understanding of the phenomenon of shrinkage, but also the different trajectories that shrinking cities or regions can take, and the critical junctures. That's also a concept from the path dependence approach that these shrinking cities can encounter during those trajectories. And as you may notice also already when you saw the entire list of all the contributions to the book, there are several cross linkages between chapters and parts of the book where topics return, sometimes with the same concept, sometimes with related concepts. And in this chapter, there's also some reference, for example, to the concept of regrowth or revitalization, and the question to what extent shrinking cities and under what circumstances shrinking cities may manage to turn to regrowth or revitalize somehow, and which shrinking cities manage to do that and which don't, and why. So part of the discussion in this chapter actually relates quite a lot to the part 4 of the book, where several contributions are looking from different perspectives to this phenomenon of whether shrinking cities can get back to regrowth or not. So at the start of the chapter, Victoria discusses where this concept comes from. It's already for several decades a well-known concept. It was, amongst others, developed in technology studies already in the 1980s, in political science, or also already some decades of research applying this concept, also in economy. A bit more recently, especially in the last 20 years, it has become quite popular in economic geography as well. And I was among the authors and also referred to a few times in this chapter, which is quite an honor, that also tried to apply it in urban geography. And recently it's also emerging, as I would say, the last 10, 20, 15 years in urban and regional planning. I also noticed that in this chapter, one of our other colleagues from the University of Amsterdam, Tuna Tazan-Kok, for example, is referred to, who has also worked with this concept. And Victoria proposes that it should be used more often in shrinkage research too, and that it would really address some gaps in the urban shrinkage literature as she sees it so far, and maybe also in the urban studies literature more in general. And she specifically focuses on well, the relative lack of multi-temporal, multi-scalar, and multi-spatial approaches in urban shrinkage literature. And in her conclusion, there's this sentence I liked so much that I would like to quote it here. As path dependence is primarily historical approach, bringing a spatial outlook by comparing different contexts over time can help to bring to light the path-dependent nature of space itself. And this is, I think, a quote which doesn't only apply to shrinking cities, but to all cities and all urban studies. Karina, can you go to the next slide? Okay, then we go to part 2, governing shrinking cities. Among the 4 co-editors, we also shared the task of editing parts of the book. This was the part I was co-editor of. One of the contributions to that was written by one of our ESRs, Flavio Besana. He has already successfully defended his PhD last year. He was one of the first to complete it. He wrote this chapter together with Kai Böhme, who is one of the supervisors of his PhD. He worked on his PhD at Spatial Foresight. It's based in Luxembourg. It's a a private research and consultancy company, and one of their main clients is actually the EU and all kinds of institutions within the EU. So they give a lot of policy advice on all kinds of EU institutions. And also in this chapter, they focus mostly on EU policies. So his main home base was Spatial Foresight, and then his thesis was co-supervised by the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan in Poland. Because for a PhD, you need someone to supervise you at the university. So the chapter wants to discuss so-called spatially blind versus place-based or place-sensitive policies. And throughout the chapter, Flavio and Kai make a plea for place-based and place-sensitive policies, contrary to the spatially blind policies, which they think are much less useful, not only for shrinking cities in particular, but for cities in general. The first part of the chapter is then reviewing projections they made for the period between 2018 and 2050, in which they look at the future perspectives of shrinking cities in Europe. So they see that part of the shrinking cities that were in 2018 shrinking cities, and also in the years before, will probably continue shrinking. Some other shrinking cities might manage to turn to some kind of stabilization, maybe still a minor level of shrinkage, maybe a slight growth or around zero. And some other shrinking cities might turn to regrowth, or they already saw the first signs of it and project that will probably continue. Then in the next part of the chapter, they discuss the influence of, on the one hand, exogenous trends on all shrinking cities, but maybe to different extents. And these different extents and whether or not these exogenous trends have an impact on shrinking cities depend a lot on local contextual factors. And this is where place-based and place-sensitive policies become very important. Then they look at EU policy responses to the phenomenon of urban and regional shrinkage, and maybe also the more general context of all kinds of inequalities at local and regional levels in Europe. And then they analyze to what extent EU policies might have an effect on shrinking cities and what kind of effect they would have. And they do this with a methodology called territorial impact assessment. So they look at policy effects, what they call exposure in the analysis, combined with regional characteristics. And for this, they use the term sensitivity. They discuss two examples of this at the time of writing, very recent examples, and I think they still are. The measures taken not only by the EU, but also by member states within the EU in response to COVID-19 and the impact they had on shrinking cities. And the impact that the Just Transition Fund, partly related to these COVID-19 measures at the EU level, has had so far until the time of writing of the chapter, and the impact it may have in the coming years. And again, a quote from the conclusion of this chapter. The examples demonstrate how TIAs, so this territorial impact assessments, can bridge the gap from theory to practice and become a powerful instrument intervening in policy processes for shrinking cities. Now I will hand over to our final speaker, René Fleschurz, and Karina will go to the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Marco. Thank you, Karina. Yeah, so on. I actually just realized that the next part, the next chapter of Norma Shemshad, actually from the fourth part of the book. But anyway, the third part then will be the last chapter to be presented. But again, this shows the great diversity of topics that we could have or that we dealt with within the book. The author, Norma Schemschat, did actually her undergrad and graduate studies in the field of political sciences at Hamburg University. And she recently finished, just 2 weeks ago, she finished her PhD at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris with the title Refugees and Revitalization, Negotiating Arrival and Placemaking Under Conditions of Urban Shrinkage. Her contribution to this book, of course, is on a similar topic. She focuses on the role of place and belonging in refugee-led vitalization in shrinking cities. The chapter starts with a description of the general debate of refugee-led revitalization, and it's focused mainly on the North American and Australian context in the literature. Furthermore, she points out the strong influence of neoliberal strategies, meaning that refugee-led revitalization is often used as a tool to attract immigrants with the goal to boost the local economy. She also points out two other major strands in the debate, where you focus either on immigration as an effective tool to deal with urban shrinkage, or you focus on the growing importance of cities with effective migration management, as we could see in some cities, especially during the 2015 migration wave, where some cities actually handled the influx of refugees better than others. She also identifies a lack of research taking into account the social dimension of especially forced migrants coming to a new city, especially a shrinking city, which have its own set of challenges and particularities you have to take into consideration. She grounded her paper and also her work in theories of placemaking and developed a framework on characteristics of urban shrinkage as an element of refugees' sense of belonging. And thus she set a foundation for more scientific analysis of the topic and the creation of empirical evidence in this area. He stresses furthermore the importance of housing and its location during the experiences also made during the 2015 migration wave, and other important aspects include the mobility services and the social infrastructure. Especially the latter aspects tend to be challenging in shrinking cities, and also the job market might not offer limited opportunities. So there are a number of challenges with the concept of refugee-led revitalization. Not last but not least, also the image of shrinking cities, the rather bad image of shrinking cities, is not helping this endeavor. And the lack of social support through migrant networks is another challenge people have to face in these shrinking cities. She concludes that the refugee-led revitalization needs to go beyond the usual aspects of economic contribution and build upon equality and the shared belief that there's a possibility of making a change and making a difference. Okay, would you please take on the next slide? Thank you, Karina. So the last chapter I would like to present is actually from part 3 of our book, Greening and Right-Sizing Shrinking Cities. The author, Simone Di Pietro from Italy, previous to his doctoral research, he was working at various universities in South America. So he already had some experience with international research. And he also finished his PhD in 2022 on the topic Building on Knowledge and Innovation, the role of green economy in revitalizing shrinking cities. In his contribution to this book, he focuses on utilizing solar energy and technology production-oriented strategies in shrinking cities, and describes the correlation between shrinking cities and energy production, especially with the focus on either producing energy via solar power on inner city brownfields, facades or rooftops, or at the fringe of the city in newly developed solar parks. The second option he points out is to engage the city and economic development in the production and development of technologies to utilize renewable energy, for example, solar modules and cells, or the control units that are necessary to steer all these technologies. So this would be more like an aspect of a substitute industry for a shrinking city. He grounds his analysis in theories of endogenous development and describes the potential of vacancies and redevelopment in shrinking cities and the space for energy as a solution that also helps to mitigate climate change effects like inner city heat islands. Setting also the phenomenon of shrinking cities into the perspective of global cities discussion, he describes shrinking cities as the counterpart of a concentration of wealth, capital, and knowledge, and describes that the basic discussion on renewable energy faces various challenges on whether to go on with these kind of developments within shrinking cities. The author continues also with a business assessment on what is necessary to make solar energy production on a city scale viable, especially also focusing on shrinking cities, and describes a number of different tools and models to make these economic assessments. He concludes that his analysis, by identifying especially small and low density cities, and in this respect also shrinking cities as laboratories for new urban development and some sort of societal change also in the phase of climate change. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we are at the end of our presentation and looking forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Karina, Marco, and René. Yeah, we open the floor to questions. Nikki already has one. Nikki, please.
Thank you, Karina, René, and Marco, for a fascinating presentation. It's interesting to learn there is a regrowth discussion going on at the same time that we are debating degrowth or beyond growth. The two are not entirely overlapping, but certainly there is a relationship, and I'm really intrigued by thinking about what that then implies for our ideas of what is a vital city. I mean, we are so used to think about the limits to growth, in environmental terms or economic terms, but apparently there is also a certain minimum floor of economic activities in a city, or some degree of social cohesion that forms part of this vital city. What is your view on that? Thank you.
May I answer? Okay. Thank you very much for this question. I believe it is really important to see what discourses are out there and how they interact and connect maybe at one point, and where are clearly things that should be distinguished. And I believe it depends on whom you ask. If you ask scholars, they will say, oh yes, degrowth, post-growth, it's all perfect. But if you ask a political leader in a city, they will say, we want growth. So they are not at a point where they would say we are beyond this thinking. So, and we are in this dilemma that on the one hand, we as urban planners, and I'm trained as an urban planner, we know that these limits of growth exist. We have to deal with that. And thinking in smaller scales, thinking as shrinkage not only as a threat, but as something that gives new opportunities for a greener, more vibrant city, is something that, you know, we all share as scholars. But beyond that, I mean, the reality is as such, many political leaders say, oh, my city is not shrinking. We need growth. Cities are losing population, and they are still adding new zoning plans for single family homes for, well, who should move there? So I believe this is a debate we have to face. We have to be very open about it, because we as scholars can have wonderful scenarios, but we have to really get the people out there on board and show them the various perspectives. So by all means, we are not catering to growth only, but also very much to alternative scenarios, as you can see, like the green economy, which is something that is very much interacted with the idea of limits to growth also. So thanks very much. Very good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. René, Marco, is there something you would like to add? If not, we'll move to the next question. No, you're okay. Okay, so Eduardo has a question. Please go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I had a question, but it was actually very similar to Nikki's, and I think Karina did a very good job at answering it. It was basically two questions, like how do you define revitalization, and if you, during your research, you were thinking of the implications of what would it mean for shrinking cities to embrace degrowth, embrace process of ruinification, of rewilding, because I think I think one of the challenges that I encountered working with shrinking cities and embedding the degrowth discourse is that I often, well, first of all, a lot of the literature on degrowth was developed in the wealthy Western countries where degrowth is an option in many ways. But for shrinking cities, it's not an option because this capitalist expansionist idea is very much embedded and everyone wants growth. So yeah, I think this is kind of like a challenge to understand how to fully embrace growth. But I think Karina sort of answered, you know, that yeah, politicians are not. But I wonder maybe within your research group, maybe if you had this type of discussions and what kind of conclusions did you reach? Thank you.
Okay, I might start one more time. And I found it very interesting that you mentioned this, you know, the Western realm that shaped this discourse of both of shrinkage, shrinking cities, and of degrowth. And actually, the only scholar in our range of PhD students dealing with the global South was Simone Di Pietro, because he also investigated shrinkage in the Mexican context, which is a very novel approach. And here, of course, you have even very other discourses. You know, you have cities that are in undergoing transitions and stress. And one city he investigated was sort of hijacked by Americans moving there and wanting to create a resort town, and what kind of tensions this also created among the community. So I believe growth and also you know, in any term is a very contested let's say term to deal with. And in my opinion, and from studying shrinking cities over the years, I would say that you have to really create a sensitivity for the places, and never ever do a one-size-fits-all approach. One scholar once said, you know, many cities are looking for logistics centers, and he compared it to the fast food of urban development. So this is something, of course, we would not want to see. But having things that are more place-based and you know, a fit to some areas is something that is very good. And by the way, in my opinion, it's also fascinating how COVID is a game changer in this discourse. So it would be fascinating to see also in what way scholars embedded in the degrowth debate are dealing with that. But I think that's that's for another panel, maybe.
Thank you, Karina. René, Marco, something you want to add?
Yeah, maybe I can try to add. So both this question and the question before, it's a question that that I'm already thinking about for a long time as well, and I do not really have the answer yet. My impression is that so far somehow the degrowth debate and the shrinkage debate still have not found each other, even though they seem to be a quite logical match. So I think somehow we have to get these two debates, try to bridge them and bring them together. I think that could be a potentially interesting step, next step in the urban shrinkage debate as well. To me, it makes quite a lot of sense to connect the two, probably to most in the room right now. But I haven't figured out yet how exactly to do it. But maybe by talking to some degrowth experts, we might get a step further. And I know in our department of geography planning and development studies, there are more and more deep growth and post-growth experts around. Yeah. So we have to get into conversation somehow, I guess.
Thank you, Marco. Yeah, indeed, this is very important. We just published a special issue on urbanizing degrowth, and this is one of the points we make. We bring together the shrinkage and degrowth literatures. So that would be great. We can, and we at the CUS can facilitate this discussion. We hope we will facilitate this discussion. René, is there something you want to add? Are you covered?
Yeah, maybe just the notion that regrowth is also very often associated with physical growth and also economic growth, of course. But I think especially for the shrinking cities debate, it is important to point out that growth in the quality of life is a very, very important aspect for these cities, and can also be coined as some sort of growth and not like a still stand, like not moving at all or moving in a shrinking direction or in a degrowth direction, but just the improvement of quality of life itself can just give the positive feeling of growth, so to say, even if it's not readable in the statistics and numbers that we all see.
Thank you very much, René and Marco. Nikki, as a follow-up or a new
Yeah,
question?
just as a follow-up, indeed, also to what Marco and said and René just now, I think it would help if we could, in making that connection between the two debates, talk more about the quality of growth. So under what conditions is what type of growth pursued in the economic dimension, in the social dimension, in the ecological dimension, and even politically. If we can shift the debate to those aspects, indeed, that ultimately lead to quality of life or well-being, that would, provide a good frame, I think, for bringing these two debates together. Thank you.
Maria, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you, Nikki. Maybe we can also take the comment or question from Franca before you respond to both, because we're coming to the end of our time. Is that okay? Franca, please.
Yes, I may or may not have, not even 2 hours ago, defended my master thesis looking at shrinking cities from a degrowth perspective and the quality of life. So I am quite curious whether you also had a project that looked at quality of life or other alternative success metrics of shrinking cities and their role in the entire debate around shrinking cities. Yeah, if you could maybe tell me whether you have more insights on that. I'm currently very into the topic.
Thanks very much. So I'm really happy that there are more and more aspects, added to the debate of shrinkage. And when I remember starting in 2004, it was really about finding out where are the shrinking cities? And now we are getting much more refined in the discourse. And I think also reaching out to other discourses is really fascinating. So you most likely are the expert on this question. I mean, quality of life is always embedded, and I believe we are always looking into that. But in our program, there was no thesis particularly looking at quality of life, but it's always an important aspect to incorporate in the research. I don't know, René or Marco, you have more aspects to add. And towards Nikki's suggestion, I think this is really intriguing, that could provide a common ground or a link between the discourses. I think that's fascinating. Maybe we should write a paper or come up with a special issue.
Marco, René?
Yeah, I could add to it. It was nice to hear from Franca that she actually finished a master thesis, trying to explore the connections. As a further piece of evidence that this is maybe a growing bridge already between discourses. Tomorrow, I will be the second reader of another master thesis at our department, which is also trying to link shrinkage, in this case not urban shrinkage, but shrinkage of a peripheral, mostly rural region with only small towns, Zeeuws-Vlaanderen in the Netherlands. And this student is also trying to look at the degrowth debate in this shrinking context and is exploring the question to what extent could it be relevant or interesting for this region to try to become a pioneer in degrowth. And unfortunately, his answer from his research so far is there's not many indications yet that this region is willing to do that. But still, it's interesting that more and more students and maybe also some researchers are exploring these connections. And next to the special issue that Maria already was involved in recently, I can also say that soon, probably will be published next year, there will be another special issue that I'm involved in, also trying to explore the connections between shrinkage, degrowth, and sustainability in the Journal of Urban Planning.
This is fantastic. René, anything you would like to add or any closing statements, because we come to the end of the.
Not sure if I'm going to find the closing thoughts on this, but yeah, I think what my colleagues also just said, that I think it's a very interesting angle to kind of bridge these kind of discussions, or to make a connection between these scientific discussions. Yeah, as Karina mentioned, because the quality aspect, the quality of development is actually kind of embedded in all the development discussions around shrinking cities. This is something very basic, and I think if this could be the gate through which other discussions can be entered, I think that would be very fruitful.
Indeed. Thank you very much, René. Marco, any final comments?
No, at this moment.
Okay, great.
But it's nice to hear this discussion developing, and I hope we can continue it some way.
Karina, any final comments?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I didn't know exactly what to expect from this book presentation, but I think I'm very thrilled that we could, interact between different discourses, or not so different, hopefully, and very much looking forward to keeping things going and developing. So Nikki, I'm very happy if we could, stay in touch and discuss things further. And thank you very much also to the University of Amsterdam for providing this opportunity of sharing our research and introducing our book to you guys.
Thank you so much, Karina, Marco, and René. This is the legacy of the Center for Urban Studies. It brings together people who wouldn't otherwise come together to work together. So we hope this will be one more instance through which a new research team will be formed and taking things forward. What I suggest to facilitate that is I already have Eduardo's, Karina's, of course, Marco's, Nikki's email. If you can please put in the chat, René and Franca, if you can please put in the chat your emails, then I will send a global email to everybody so that you all have each other's email. And anyone else who is here and who would like to be part of this follow-up network, please put your email in the chat so we can bring you together. Let me thank you all for a wonderful presentation, a wonderful discussion, really fruitful, really engaging. And many thanks to Francesca for organizing this event. And I really hope this discussion will lead to follow-up. And a final thing I really wanted to highlight is your project, Karina, Marco, and René, is indicative of what Marie Curie International Training Network can do. It can really redefine a field and highlight ways forward in ways that other projects cannot do. And I think most people who have been involved in ITN know this is the way, and you did an amazing job with this project. And we look forward to hearing more about the follow-up academic outputs and other outputs. Thank you all for being here, and we wish you a wonderful evening and hope to see more. Nikki, do you have a question or is your hand left? Okay, yeah, it's okay.
Oh, I was clapping.
Oh, it's a clap. Yes, sorry. Yes, yes, yes. Indeed. Yeah, with these electronic things, we can't clap properly, but yeah, this is the way to indicate indeed. So thank you all and hope to see you soon in another occasion.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye now.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.